Thank you guys for coming. This is our first of the new year of Tech Talks. We had a pretty crazy beginning of the year, so we're a little bit late in getting started, but this is one of several. We moved them to this time in part because a lot of classes are scheduled over the lunchtime period, so it was very hard for faculty to get here, so we're hoping this will be a better time. So just real quick, mark your calendars. We have December 1st, the next Tech Talk is No More Snow Days. Our lovely Esther Chang went to a workshop recently on how faculty are using different technologies when classes are missed due to snow, and this was held up in Boston where this was a huge, as you can imagine, problem last year. And so some academic technologists and faculty thinking hard about what kinds of sort of Plan B assignments you can have ready to go, where students maybe use a discussion board or you communicate through Skype or something like that to make up a class so that you don't have to have a regular makeup period. So Esther will have lots of ideas for us. And then our Spring Tech Talk Tates, we're still working on various topics for this. Some of them will be faculty showcasing some of the work they've been doing with the Mellon Seed grants that we've been running. I should say faculty and staff. Actually, we've had some academic departments, academic co-curricular kind of departments like civic engagement that have been using these materials as well. And then I know that there's, I think it'll be something on research. We have a subscription to something called InfoEd, and InfoEd has some grant finding materials that Bryn Mawr folks can use as a part of that are sort of mailing lists and things like that I'm working with Billy Joe to give people a demo of. But we are always open to ideas, so if you have anything about a tech talk that you want to see, please let me know or let any of the folks here know, and we'll be happy to do it. Okay, so I went back and looked. We did this is kind of a repeat of something we did last year, and I went back and sort of looked at what it is that we talked about and realized that you could kind of divide it into three categories. So one is sort of strategies, techniques, and systems that people use, sort of kind of personal ways of dealing with it that aren't necessarily technological, and then there are the kind of technological aids that can help with that, right? And then there's what I like to call supply side management. So it's ways of reducing the email that's coming into you, and usually that involves working with your team or people that you know and sort of agreeing upon other ways of communicating or ways to reduce email. So I thought I would throw it out to you guys and kind of see if some of you have different strategies, techniques, systems that you use. We also have Melissa Cresswell here as a sort of expert in these things, who gets and sends lots of email. What's your title? Director of Communications?
Planning and Communications.
Planning and Communications. So she does a lot of communications planning, right, for different projects and things like that, thinking about how to reach out to people, but also thus gets lots of email herself. And then I also have myself up here, and I can show you different things as they come up. Okay? So in terms of strategies, techniques, systems, do you guys have ideas, things that you do, things that you... how often do people check email?
24/7.
24/7? Okay, yeah. One of the things that I see commonly in a lot of the systems that people talk about, and you can search email overload and you'll come up with all kinds of systems. There's one called Getting Things Done. There's one that has the 3 Ds: defer, delay, do. I forget what the third one is. Delete, right? But so the idea is that you go through your inbox and you just quickly say defer, delete. You sort of quickly route your email. But almost always what they say is to make the time that you look at email finite and not 24/7, right? Have specific times that you go to email, limited times that you look at email, and then you walk away from email, right? Otherwise it can become all-encompassing. I found I often don't look at email until noon. I let myself have the morning to get things done, and then I let myself get distracted. What about you, Melissa?
That's a really good idea. Because this is one thing that I've always wanted to try, but that I don't feel like I've at all mastered, is sort of being pragmatic about when I check my email. It's just always open, and I look at it all like compulsively, as most of us do. I did recently separate on my phone my work email into, I'm using the native iOS app, native to my phone for my Bryn Mawr email, and I'm using actually the Google provided app for my personal Gmail. So having them in two separate apps is kind of nice, because I can see like which one has new messages, and my threshold for how long I'm going to ignore one or the other is different. So that's kind of not really the same thing, but it helps with the like constant phone checking, because that's really the worst compulsion, is the constant phone email checking, I think. And if they're both in your native iOS app, then you're going to check it. Like you're looking at your personal email, but you see the Bryn Mawr one there, like nudging you, with new messages. But yeah, I would really like to check it, hourly or every 2 hours or something like that. I think that's a good thing to try. I've always wanted to try that. But I love the idea of not checking it first thing in the morning, because there are very few things in my life that are so urgent that I must know about them the moment I walk in the door. If it's that important, I probably knew about it yesterday.
Or they called you.
Right. Or they're there. They're already there.
They're standing at your door.
Right. So there's that. And also I find like, I'm just going to check my email for 15 minutes at the beginning of the day. That's sort of in my mind how long it takes to check email. And then an hour and a half later, I'm actually doing my work. So I love that idea. I'm going to try it starting tomorrow morning. First thing in the morning.
For those of you who teach, do you give your students guidelines about email and when to email and how often you check? This is something else that I found. My students especially tend to be on 24/7, and they certainly tend to be doing their work, when I'm asleep, essentially. So telling them that I check once or twice a day often helps a lot, because they're not expecting immediate response, which even if I can give them immediate response, not setting up that expectation helps, I think. So is it just me? Does anybody else not check email, like, purposefully? No? Okay, I find it a huge time, it's a sinkhole. So I mentioned getting things done. That's one technique that people go to. You might have heard something called Inbox Zero. These are all sort of techniques. And basically what they try to get you to do is to go through and either, and I mentioned the 4 Ds, delete, defer, which in my world means make a task that I'll do later, right? Do if it's something I can do really quickly. And what was the other one?
Delete, defer, delegate?
Delegate, right. Email someone, forward it to someone else and say, hey, I think this is your job. Or we have a task management system, which I'll actually show you, where I can create tasks within this task management system and either assign myself to do it or have other people to do it.
I actually think one thing that really helps you not look at your email constantly is to not use your inbox as a to-do list.
Yeah.
Use your email. Don't use your inbox as a to-do list. Like, set up another folder in your email if you want to use your email as a to-do list. Or use some other thing, electronic or otherwise, to track your things you need to do today, in perpetuity, this week, whatever, this month. Because otherwise you have to look at it all the time because you are looking at your to-do list. So if you remove your to-do list from your inbox, conceptually, I mean, like, it's not actually a list, but it's your emails reminding you of all the things you need to do. Like, do that elsewhere, and then you're not looking at it constantly. I think that's part of it, too.
And so, like, a lot of systems will tell you, okay, either if there's some electronic way, like, there's a task list within Zimbra. One thing we should sort of say as a caveat, too, as you guys probably know, we're moving email systems. So everything that we're going to talk about, there's a way to do it in Zimbra, but there's also ways to do it in the other platforms as well, right? So fear not. But usually there are 100 different apps or web-based systems for managing to-do lists. Like Remember the Milk was one that I used for a long time. There's a whole slew of them, and a lot of them allow you to forward an email to the app, and it will put it in as a to-do list, right? It will make the subject line the to-do, and then you can just check it off or not check it off. So that's a technological way that you might get it out of your inbox, right? Another way is to simply write down the to-do list in your to-do
Or
thing.
set up a folder that's just like to-do or whatever,
Yeah.
and put them all in that folder. So as soon as it comes into your inbox, you look at it, and if it's something you need to do, put it in that folder. So it's not in your inbox anymore. That way you don't have to like copy and paste or transcribe, but the forwarding to a to-do list sounds like a neat idea. I just don't want to have to like retype everything, into a new thing, because then I won't do it.
I also have in my inbox, I have a folder called Links to Post. And these are,
I'm sorry.
links to post. That means nothing. It just means something to me. But it's basically, I get lots of articles, and there might be things that I want to post on our blog about or something like that, but I'm not going to do it immediately, and it's not pressing, and it's not urgent. So I put those into that folder, just like Melissa was talking about, sort of things to do, but not essential. I've seen people use a tickler file for sort of like ideas that someday I might get around to being able to do, and I don't want to lose it, and I want to remember who recommended it, but it's not pressing. I've seen people have an urgent folder, usually urgent stuff I guess you probably do pretty quickly, but
I learned a few years ago, have set up 3 folders: next actions, archive, and waiting for. So you put all the emails, things you're waiting for someone to get back to you about before you can do whatever you need to do next. Next actions, stuff you need to do, you're not going to do it. If you can do it right this minute, do it and delete it.
Yes.
Or archive it or whatever. But if you can't, then you put it in the next actions, and that's sort of your to-do list, so to speak. And then the archive is just stuff you need to keep, but that doesn't need to. And you can sort your archive if you need to, or tag it or whatever, but searching is pretty good too. So that's one. That's what I use. It's not perfect right now. Like I was all excited last time we did this that I had a 0 inbox for quite a while, and that's not true anymore. But
yeah,
it fits on one screen.
I get good until I go on vacation or I get sick or something,
Right.
and then like right now I think I've got 1,500 messages in my yeah.
I don't know whether this is the right moment to ask this question, and also I'm really exposing my ignorance, but a couple of years ago when I got a cell phone for the first time, or an iPhone for the first time, I noticed it was putting my emails in a thread, which is super helpful, but I don't know how to do it on Zimbra.
Yes, and this is one of those things that most email programs will let you do, either thread or, and in Zimbra, it's up here under view. By conversation, yeah, sorry.
So once I change it, it will always thread things?
Yes, until you re-change it. So it's
You
this
can
view
flip back
button.
and forth as much as you want. It won't mess anything up, but it's just a view.
Yeah, by conversations. And again, this is, one of the things, I think all of these mail programs, it's kind of like Mac and PC, to not violate each other's copyright or patents or whatever. They call everything differently. So it'll probably be named something different in Gmail or in the Apple folder or whatever. But there's going to be a setting where you can flip that back and forth, yeah.
Can I say something about all these, like getting things done or, 0 inbox, whatever, all these different methods? There is absolutely no system, technological, human, whatever, on this planet that doesn't need to be checked in on by a human on some regular basis. So whatever you use, whatever you set up, you can't just let it sit there and do its thing, and you can't trust it 100%. You have to set yourself a schedule, put it on your calendar, every 3 weeks, whatever, I'm going to check and make sure things are going in the right place and things are getting done and stuff isn't falling through the cracks. Because you might need to tweak it here and there or whatever. And that's true for absolutely any system of any kind. Email, technology, your body, everything.
Also, is there something that we should know about how a thread forms itself? In other words, will it thread better if everybody uses the same header?
Yeah, so essentially it's taking the subject line and any replies to that subject line will say re this or forward this, right? And so that's how it structures it.
And as soon as the header changes,
Yeah, it thinks it's a new
that thread's over.
The
thread.
subject line, yeah. If you change, if someone changes the subject line on myself,
Which actually gets to a supply side. One of the techniques that works really well, I've discovered, when I send out email announcements about things like this now, I put everything someone needs to know in the subject line, right? The date, the time, right? And you can just look at it and delete it. And so if you email several people regularly, getting people in the habit of meet you at 5, and have it in the subject line. Don't even put anything in the body, and then you can delete it when you've seen it.
only if you can say everything in the subject.
Well,
line,
yeah,
though. It's
that
really
doesn't always
annoying
work.
when it's like meet you at ... and then the rest of it is in the body of the email.
Yeah. Right. Another thing you'll notice is I've got all these folders here in my inbox, which have numbers next to them. So one of the things that I do is have, if I subscribe to mailing lists or things like this, or if I get a lot of email in this particular thing, somehow or another, this was the personal, non-personal thing, right? I did this reunion for a program that I did way back in college, and somehow or another they got my work email address. So all of the stuff that was going to my personal email was now coming to work. And so what I did was I essentially created a filter so that if I get something from any of these people, it goes to this folder here, and I can check it whenever I want. So one thing that you will see in any email program that you have is here it's called filters. In Gmail it's called labels. In Outlook I think it's called rules. But it's essentially, you can set up, and I'll show you some. Actually, let me show you let's see. Like, for example, here's my appointment summary, right? If I wanted to, I could create a filter. Oh, wait, I've got it. Not threaded. Oops. Okay. So if I wanted to, I could create a filter. And I don't know if you saw what I did, but I right-clicked on the email, and if you're on a Mac, you would control-click. And it has this contextual menu, and one of the things is new filter. When you go that way from a particular message, it puts details from the message that it thinks would be important to you. Okay, you could also, and so sometimes it's easier to work with one that you know. Really, in this case, what I know all of those messages will contain is the same, this part, appointment summary, right? This part that you have, blank appointments today, will change because it might be different ones, right? If I get other emails that might have appointment summary in it, I wouldn't want my filter to only be based on that. But let's say I'm pretty certain that this is the only time I get emails with a subject line that say appointment summary, : right? I could also say, I don't remember where it's coming from, but oh, that's weird. From is me. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so I would give this filter a name, and I would click OK, and then I would, so filters and labels and rules and all these things, they usually have two parts. One is identifying the messages you want to affect, and the second part is what do you want to do with them, right? And there are a bunch of actions that are available: keep in inbox, discard, file into folder. So if I decided, okay, I don't really want to get these appointment summaries, it doesn't tell me anything I don't know already, I'm going to look at my calendar no matter what, I can just say discard. Now let me run that. I think I've got to go to preferences to run it.
Then you discard after you've read them once, or discard as soon as received?
In this case, you have a discard as soon as you received. I've never seen one where it has discard, and I don't think you can do one where it's unread and then it's like once you've read it, it discards it. I haven't been able to figure out how to do that yet in Zimbra. Might be possible in other things. Where are filters?
Oh,
like oops.
5 down or so.
Yeah, there we go. So these are all my filters. You will discover that a lot of them say delete. So I try to be very aggressive at unsubscribing from mailing lists. There are certain mailing lists that do not pay attention to me, and this is the way that I get around them. I basically create a filter for anyone that sends me email I don't want to get, and I say file it into junk and then discard it, basically. And that's one of my sort of, if I have to delete it more than 4 times, right, it's worth it to go ahead and set up a filter because it'll be less time for me. A couple of these are from when I was in graduate school. I had an account at Columbia, which is where I did my graduate work. I still have things that are tied to it that have managed to get forwarded all the way to my new Bryn Mawr account, but I can't get into them to turn them off because I no longer have access to that Columbia account, right? So this is how I handle that. Some of these are those move ones, and again, I named these just for my own thing. This is to move things that I want to go into those folders, like the mailing lists that I get, where I want them just to go into a folder that I deal with. But here's my new appointments one. And let's okay, let's see if I can run it. There we go, run filter. I can choose where. I'm going to do my inbox. And so you'll notice it will tell me how many it's getting rid of. And sometimes this is a bit of a trial and error. You need to play with it to get it to work. So we talked about manually putting things into folders as a way of organizing or somehow getting them onto a to-do list. So to-do lists are not in your inbox. Another thing that helps a lot, I'm going to cancel this because it might take forever. And it might take forever to cancel. Is using, you can see these different calendar invitations that I'm getting, sending people invitations. So how many of you guys use Zimbra Calendar or Google Calendar? With trepidation, okay. Now this is something where there's added benefit if everybody is using the same tool. So if everybody's using the same tool, if everybody's keeping their calendar in Zimbra, or at least for people who do, when I want to make an appointment with, say, Melissa and Elizabeth over here, right? I do a new appointment. I add them. Look at that. I can see when they are free and busy down here. So on tomorrow, I notice that there's no time that all of us are going to be free, right? Let's see if Friday is better. Oh, look, Friday we could meet at 9 to 10. We're all free, or after 2:30. Okay, so if you're working with people that keep Zimbra calendars, this is going to show up. Let's see. Here's someone I know doesn't keep a Zimbra calendar. For people that don't keep a Zimbra calendar, you won't see any details, right? You won't see any, but you can still send them the invite, and then they can tell you, yes, no, it works for me. But this is another feature that, and also typically you can show your calendar to other people, right? Rather than have them Well, what about Friday? Oh, no, Friday won't work for me. Well, how about Thursday? You know, doing that over email. The other thing that I find, if it's just 1 or 2 people, call. Right? Because the number of emails that go back and forth trying to figure out what day will work for everybody, just call. You know, is I think, yeah.
So this might be name the filter advertisements. Because I get 16 an hour from places that I probably bought something from in 1820. And then, but I didn't, when you put the filter thing up, I just said okay, and it said keep in the inbox, because that was the default.
Right.
And then I tried to do it again and said no, put it into junk.
Right.
And then it said sorry, but that filter already exists.
Ah.
So I can't find the filter that says advertisements.
Go to preferences.
Okay, I go to preferences.
And then filters, which is under mail. You might have to, in the little menu over here, you might have to turn down mail.
Oh, I see filters.
Yeah. And it should be in your list there.
Got it.
And you should be able to select it and click edit filter
Okay.
instead of.
Okay, now I can say send it to junk.
Yeah. Unfortunately. There was another question. Was it you, Jim?
I
Did
was
you
just
have a-
simply wanting to ask what's the difference between junk and trash?
Ah, good question. And junk, it's weird because sometimes they use junk here and sometimes they use spam. Essentially, it flags it as something you don't want. And if you're using a software program that learns, like Gmail is very famous for learning, supposedly. So if you flag something as spam often enough, it starts.
That is the case with Zimbra as well.
Yeah,
if
it'll
you flag
start
it with as spam. It actually educates a larger pool of spam detection.
Is that new? Because I was doing that for, I don't know, a few years, and then
Yeah.
somebody said, no, you don't, that's not really learning anything.
It does work now. It's newer and it's
Oh,
new.
okay.
I don't remember when it.
We shipped it
maybe
and
a
then we
year or
shipped.
so
Yeah,
ago.
we shipped it again.
Yeah, maybe
Okay.
2 years.
Okay.
It's new-ish, but not.
Okay.
Yeah, but not brand new.
And ours, a lot of people are probably getting the same spam. So I think for our system it works.
Yeah.
Like imagine Gmail. I mean, everybody that's getting spam is saying spam,
Right.
spam, right? It's probably learning a lot faster. It's got a bigger pool than
Right, it's
our
limited
little pool.
effectiveness, but it's still worth doing, because
Yeah.
it only takes a second, but it is a limited. But the spam, there's spam, there's junk, and there's trash, and I actually don't know the difference between.
I think spam and junk are
They're the same
The-
thing.
they're analogous terms used by different systems for the same thing. Trash is just the thing where everything goes and then you delete it. And one thing to know about Zimbra is that the trash does not get deleted. Okay. So I've got a lot of messages. Unless you, again, I'm right clicking or control clicking and say empty trash.
It does eventually, doesn't it?
No,
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Or it can get to buku messages. Let's say I've never gotten to the point where it did. One thing, if you...
No, I think it's a period of time.
Oh, period of time.
I do think it actually, I'm pretty sure. It does actually delete eventually. So don't store things in your trash and put it there. You really
Yeah, I wouldn't store things in my trash. But I will say that I, like Melissa, I have only a few things that I move email into. So I've got here archive and receipts. These are things that I know I need to keep for a long time, meaning more than a year or so, because it might be the receipt for software or something that I want to be able to find again, like my username for something. I have a hold button, which is basically everything I've dealt with. I try to move it into hold pretty quickly. It's just stuff I don't want in my inbox, but I'm going to keep it for a little while because I want to be able to search it. Right, so I want it in my email system, but I don't want it cluttering up my inbox. Because I search for things to find stuff and I don't have folders for every single project and folders, I tried to do that and it just took way too much time to like move all the email, and then it was just moving the email that came to me. It wasn't moving the sent email, right, email I sent. And so I just figured, you know what, it's easier just to search for it. But the flip side of that is having, 15,000 messages in your mail system, it's going to take forever to search, right? And you're going to get a lot of things you don't really need. So one of the things I've tried to become better at is taking email out of my email system every so often, right? Deleting, basically. And there are ways you can export from Zimbra, and again, this is something that's pretty common across platforms. In Zimbra, it's under import-export. You can actually export particular folders, all of your email, your entire inbox. But what I do is I will export my hold folder, which is where all of my sort of store for a little while, and then my sent folder, which is all the email that I send out. I'll take I'll keep the last year, pretty much, and I'll take the rest of it. I'll show you right now. So let's do my sent folder. Okay. If you click this advanced settings, you can choose different things, including start and end dates. So I want to do a year previous, so I'll do November 2014, right? And then I'll do to yesterday. Oh, actually I should do 2 years. Sorry. Okay, so basically November 2013 to November 2014, so that means I only have 2014 to 15 in my mailbox, right? And I just click export. And it creates a zipped file, which I store on my H drive, and then I'll go and delete those things that I just archived, right? So I'll go to my sent folder and I'll search for everything older than November 2nd, 2014, and I'll delete it all. And then if I need to, I can use the import feature in Zimbra to import this back in.
They don't stand alone.
Yeah.
So when we don't have Zimbra anymore,
You won't have it.
they're not going to do you any good.
Yeah.
So that's
This is
all
important.
for archiving.
This is really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're not going to have Zimbra anymore soon. So, well,
Well,
you can do it, but
so-
just know
and
that
again-
when we switch over after commencement.
Right.
So what is,
But-
how would we get our old stuff?
But this is a concept
Right.
that's important because you can do it
So
in pretty much
notes-
any email platform. We're just saying all your email will transfer over when we move out of Zimbra and into a new system.
Right.
Everything's going to transfer over, so you don't worry about that.
All 20 terabytes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry about you don't have to worry about exporting all your email and doing anything with it.
No.
That's not going to be
But if you
necessary.
had exported it and you wanted that email to also migrate, you'd have to import it back in
Put
and
it
then
back
migrate
in.
it, right?
Sounds like there's a disincentive to do that.
Well, I keep in mind though that I also have this archive, and that's for things that I know I need to keep for a long period of time. My hold folder and getting rid of the old hold stuff is really stuff that a lot of it's things like, do you want to have lunch? No, I don't know. Well, how about this? Or whatever. I really could delete it.
I think the concept of figuring out what tiers of storage you need is really the takeaway. Like,
How long do I need to store
is
this?
this something you're going to need to reference every day for the next month? Is this something that you need for documentation purposes? We have a lot of things like that where you need to keep it for a record of some official correspondence. So we have those kinds of things, and then we have, stuff that it's a project that I worked on a year ago. Maybe in 2 years we'll do another similar project, and I'm going to want to look back through stuff. So thinking about how can I kind of tier my storage, and what way of archiving or exporting or sorting works for me. It's not so much like you should archive your emails, start doing that now,
Right.
as it is like this is a good thing to think about. And also just to note, the search in Zimbra is not great, and having fewer emails to search will potentially make it work better. The search functionality in whatever email platform we move to, whether it's Google Apps for Education or Microsoft 365, will be better than the search. And so I think we're getting to a world where we can depend a little bit more on searching for stuff you're looking for, and a little bit less on having, hundreds of folders that you sort everything into so that you can find it again.
This may sound like a basic question, but to do it, can you do a search where you search for a phrase as it is? Do you put it into quotes, or will
I think in
recognize it?
I think in Zimbra you can put it in quotes.
One thing
To play with it a little. I'm not 100% sure.
Zimbra, I have found, for example, if you're searching for someone's username, right, like E. McCormick is Elizabeth McCormick, and I work with lots of Elizabeths, so I usually just type her name in, it won't find part of that. You have to type in the whole E. McCormick, right, for whatever reason. So I think it probably puts the things by default, would be my guess.
Yeah.
Another thing to know is, even though Zimbra's not the best in terms of searches, it gives you this little search bar here, but there's actually this advanced, which lets you do from Gina on a particular date, right? If I want to do a range of dates, I can do after this and before that, or something like that. Sorry, that would be backwards. But you know what I'm saying. I can use the multiple dates to create a range if I need to. If I only want to see things from Gina, for example, that were in my sent folder, so I know I sent her something, I would actually put Gina in the to line here, right? So this search searches everything. If I just want to search the to, the from, the subject, the content, so for your phrase, if it's a phrase within the email, it's probably better to search it there because it'll be looking at just the body of the message rather than trying to find it and everything else.
For what it's worth, I think one of the reasons why Zimbra search is not all that great is because it's actually pretty precise. We've become used to, like, in the world, most of the searching you probably do is Google searching. It's a fuzzy search. It's a little more forgiving. So you actually are more likely to find what you're looking for most of the time. This is so specific that if you have one little letter or punctuation out of place, there's nothing.
Yeah. The one thing that always saves me, and this might just be me, is sometimes in my inbox I have like one unread message. I can't find it anywhere. You can use the advanced search and say status, and it'll show unread messages.
Unread, flagged, read, replied, right?
Sure.
Status.
Yeah. Status under advanced searching.
So click the advanced button here, and then status.
Which is the red flag.
Right. So status and date I find actually very helpful, and folder, being able to restrict it to a certain folder because I don't want.
Ranges help a lot.
Yeah.
Jeff, did you have a question too?
Yeah, I know a guy who has, let's say, 62,289.
You're asking for a friend.
Is that an extremely bad practice?
Does it get your way?
Not that I know of.
Then no.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, until someone tells us that we need to limit our email storage. I mean, we have quotas, right, which are probably also going to become a thing of the past.
Well, I can go. I've once gone through and taken out the big attachments, which makes it just text.
Yeah.
But if I don't delete it at the time it comes in, it kind of stays there forever.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's okay.
I really rarely go back to messages more than a few years, so that's one of the reasons why I delete everything back a few years.
That's
Not the stuff that I'm putting in my archive that I say, you must hold on to this for multiple years, but I do, it's very rare that my projects, for example, last longer than, say, 4 years, so I don't really need to keep 5 years worth of email.
There's
or 6
records
years
and there's
of-
correspondence. Sometimes they're the same thing, but sometimes they're not. So, like, you can, I mean, I think I could probably, I'm a Bryn Mawr alum, and I started working 2 weeks after I graduated, so I have the same email account that I've had since 2017. And it's got crazy stuff in it. Just the quantity is out of this world. And I still don't, it's okay. But dealing with it, I mean, it would be like I'd need another 3 lifetimes to try to parse that. So, fortunately.
So another thing that's cool about the search feature, even though we were dissing it, is that you can save a search. So you can set up, let's say I, have a search where I want to find everything from Gina in the last week because I want to make sure I've dealt with it, right, or something like this, or from Elizabeth in the last week, because I want to make sure I've really paid attention to that. I could set that search up, find those things, and then I could do this saved search here. Okay, so one of the things that always bugged me about Zimbra is there's no unread mail button. There's no button that lets me see only my unread mail. However, I created a search within my inbox for the status unread, and I saved it. And so now I have a button that shows me all my unread mail. Okay. So one of the things that I've done is I've created a lot of, and this is actually how I dealt with the spam catcher summaries that we get, right? I have a search that finds them, and I just delete them all, right? Canceled invites, accepted invites. I find them.
Yeah.
These are people emailing me, telling me that they've accepted my invite. I just, once in a while, I delete them all, right?
I haven't used save searches at all. That's a great idea.
I used to all the time.
So does that mean,
Appointment summary, look.
does that mean those never go to your inbox? They just always go right to that?
No. So this is just, so these are actually things that go to my inbox, but every so often I want to get rid of them because they're just clutter, right? So for example,
Oh, it's a saved search.
yeah, it's a saved search. So it's just finding it, and you can see it's finding it from multiple different folders, right? From my sent folder, which is, oh, this is because it's sending it to myself.
Yes.
Right.
So I routinely must delete it in my inbox, but I'm not deleting it in my sent folder, but I can find it
But
and
it's
delete
a,
it.
yeah, it's a save search, and then you can do with that chunk of stuff whatever you want.
Right.
When I'm trying to clean up my inbox, I scroll down and just check them off. Sometimes it's totally unchecked, checked,
Mm-hmm.
which is annoying. But I can only go so far, and then it stops. It won't let me continue.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening?
It does, it always shows you, I don't know if it's 50 or 100
You can set that
at a time.
how many you want it to show you at a time.
Right. So it shows you a certain number at a time. And then you have to go to the next page, essentially, to see the rest of them.
But it doesn't.
I think
It kind of sounds like that might be more what you're experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that it could be is that you can control, how many messages you see in your inbox at any one time. So you could shorten that so that that's less likely to happen. You could say, I want 25 messages. And then that means that you're going to have to flip page if you have 100 messages, or more. But you could do that to help
You
control.
don't want to know how many messages.
No, there's no judgment.
But I mean,
So one thing that might help too, Bryn, is that you can actually, so I've got 3 messages here checked. So I could go through this whole screen, right? Let's say, and I picked all the ones. I can hit delete, and it will delete them. And then I can keep scrolling. So you can kind of periodically do that, and that way you don't have to worry about them unchecking as you scroll.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I have one semi-miraculous thing to report about Zimbra.
Yes?
Sometimes you go and you hit the yellow flag at the top.
Mm-hmm.
The red flag that red flags everything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh crap, now I'll never find the actual red flag. And you unclick it, and it leaves only your former red flag.
Ah, that's good to know.
I thought that was a miracle.
Yeah, because that could really, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Another cool thing, do you know that you can drag an email onto a calendar date and use it to start making a calendar?
No.
Let's show that. Yeah.
Oh.
Seriously, I think the only person who knows
So,
this is
according to, so you do this, you drag.
you drag it to a calendar date,
Well,
and it's going to invite everyone who's on that email.
Unless you
This is
say
gonna
no.
blow your minds.
unless you say no,
Unless you say no.
I'll say yes.
But it's not going to send an invitation. It's just going to start one that you can then edit. So it gets you started, and it puts the text of the email in the agenda. It's amazing.
That's amazing. Why are we doing
If you don't use calendar, you don't care. But
It's so cool.
So we've only got about 8 minutes left, and I want to make sure we talk about some supply side things.
the revolution.
The revolution starts with you. So some of the things that Melissa and I have talked about are like, you know, stop using your inbox as a task list, right? Keep a to-do list somewhere. If it's on paper, fine. But, you know, somehow or another, or at least maybe have folders for do in a week, do in a year, someday kind of thing or something, right? But don't have them all in your inbox. Or if you absolutely have to, which I do, what I will do is instead of keeping them as unread, I'll keep them as flagged. And then I can use that search for flagged, and find everything that I flagged, right? So that I know that the unread email really is unread, and it's not just stuff that I have tried to flag for myself, right? So that's one way to do it. So other sorts of supply side things, it's really interesting. I looked into this a lot, and I've thrown out some ideas, and people are just like, so one of the things, I think this is something you really need to work with people that you email frequently to do, right? So, for example, a lot of times you'll say, hey, can you get me this thing? And they'll say, yeah, here it is. And I'll say, okay, thanks. And then they say, you're welcome. You know, well, that's 4 emails right there. So one of the things that's suggested if you're working with people, you know, is just the thanks becomes implied, right? Or you see them, the next time you see them, you say thank you, right? But don't do the thank you, you're welcome, because that's 2 more emails adding to the thing, right? So that's one thing. Putting things in the subject line, if you can, so that people don't have to read the body, is another. Task lists, there's lots of programs that let you share task lists if you're working on projects so that you can kind of jointly manage that if you want. That's another. Using the calendar rather than, or calling someone to find out when a good time is, rather than 7 emails back and forth. It's particularly painful for people like Jason Driscoll, Gina's executive assistant, or Bren, or poor Betsy Cancellieri, who are trying to schedule like 1 million people, you know. Imagine having to get emails back from everyone saying, oh, I can do these days, but not that one, and trying to keep track of that. Right? Having the calendar works a lot better for that.
I actually, and I can't remember who it was, I am always trying to get meetings together with different faculty and staff, and I use that when is good, and that has saved, over the last 2 years, one of the professors told me, and that's the best thing, and every time I use it, if someone's not familiar with it, they'll say, what is that?
Right.
You don't have to remember, you know, a password or anything like that, and it's the easiest thing, and you don't have to do all these emails all the time.
Doodle is another one like this. You might know. It's essentially you go and you put in a couple of...
Yes, I do
Doodle, right. You put in several choices, and people sign up for which ones work for them, and then you take the one that everybody can make, and you make that the calendar invite. Yeah, that's really useful.
Use that with students, but for the faculty and staff, this is really easy.
I should say another... whenisgood.net or Doodle. If you Google those, yeah, and they're real simple. You have to know the email addresses of the people that you're sending it to. But otherwise, and you're right, they don't need to necessarily have an account on or anything to get set up. Moodle has something called Moodle Choice. So for those of you who use Moodle frequently to organize people or classes, I can show you how it's a similar thing. You just set up the different options and the students sign up for it. And you can even, with all of these, you can set it up so that, like, if you're trying to get it so that, you know, sometimes you're trying to set up a meeting time for everybody, but sometimes you want people to split up into groups or something, and some groups are going to be on this day and some groups are going to be that day. You know, you can do that with Moodle Choice. You can say, okay, 5 people can take this slot, and 5 people can take that slot, and 5 people can take that slot. So that helps immensely. It's sort of the electronic equivalent of having a piece of paper that's passed around, right, where everybody's writing down where they can do. Yeah, so export's only something you do sort of as a backup, or for me, it was, I have the equivalent when I'm writing. I have a file called Cutting Room Floor, and it's all the things that I need to cut out of the document, but I can't bear to because I spent so long writing it. That's the equivalent for me with the, that's what I'm doing essentially, is I'm saying, no, I really can delete this, but I'm not quite sure I can, so
but I need it out of my site right now.
Exactly. It's kind of like the donations box in my closet too. You know, it's like I put it in there. If I don't,
I think you're me.
If I don't get it out within the next, you know, however many months, it goes away. Right? It's kind of a way station for me. Yeah. usually I find I can just delete. Sure.
Thanks for coming.
I did once actually do a search for lunch, and like was just deleting everything that came up that said lunch, because half the time it's, hey, you want to have lunch? I don't know. Can we do this time? Maybe that time, you know, whatever. So I don't know. There's no good way.
Thank you.
Sure. Any questions or ideas or? Yeah.
I'm interested in what you were talking about people that teach and how they set boundaries with
Ah,
that they
yes. I have said I go home at 6, or, you know, I check at these times and that's it. So, you know, I know you're working on your paper at the last minute, but I'm not going to be able to give you feedback, basically, is the way I've said it. Or I'll say, I'll give you feedback when I get in at 9, you know, or something like that. Or sometimes I will, if it's something that's due that I know people are going to be working on, I will say, okay, ordinarily I won't do this, but for these 2 days, I will check, you know, between 9 and noon, which I don't normally do, or something like that. So I find when just communicating. Another thing that I've done, though, is in Moodle. Where's my Moodle? Moodle, every course in Moodle has a news forum. And if any student ever asks me a question, be it by phone, by email, however they ask, you know, I always post the answer and the question to that news forum, because A, it's an archive, right? And whenever I send email out to my students for a class, I send it through the news forum, because it archives it up there, and if they lose the email, they know they can go to the news forum. So that's another thing that I've kind of tried to socialize them to do.
Jobs is just that.
But I do think there's something to be said for socialization around sort of professional expectations, right? And so you can say, look, I don't typically check at these times. You know, so one thing that I have been very careful about giving out my my cell phone number to people, for example. But that might be an instance in which I would say, I will give you this number. Only use it if this comes up.
There are emergencies and there are emergencies. I mean, we get frantic, urgent emails all the time. But do we work in a hospital? No. So, like, no one's going to die. You know, so there's a little bit of that, like, and we do it too. So, like, managing ourselves, you know, not being like.
And I actually, especially in the first weeks of class, for very large classes, I have purposefully not answered emails from students outside of normal business hours, just to kind of reinforce this idea that I'm not going to be doing that, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe there are other profs aren't going to be here.
Yeah.
And you may suffer for it in the short term, but it might be good in the longer term.
The other thing, if it's a large group that I've done, is ask everyone to exchange contact information with 2 other people, so that they ask those 2 people, and if those 2 people don't know, then they ask me.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Because in a big class, yeah, because typically, you know, they're asking questions that have been asked and answered, and that's the way to find out. So,
That's a great idea.
You want me to show that?
do you
I did a search for emails from my boss.
do you want to delete so if you delete this here, the search, it just deletes the search. If you check these boxes and delete, then you're deleting the mail. Does that make sense?
So I did.